Welcome to You've Got This with Sarah Hammaker, a podcast to encourage and equip moms along their parenting journey. Join Sarah each week as she interviews dads and moms like you and discusses the joys, challenges, and rewards of raising kids.
Hi, and welcome to this week's You've Got This. I'm your host, Sarah Hammaker, and I'm glad you joined me. Today, I'm talking with Mark Hancock. He's the CEO of Trail Life USA. And Mark has been involved with Trail Life, which started in 2014, since the very beginning. His two sons were involved in Trail Life. And we're going to talk about leadership in boys today. As most of my listeners know, I have 4 children. My 2 oldest are girls and my 2 youngest are boys. They're tweens now, my boys. And I see that leadership for both girls and boys is so important. So Mark, why is leadership important for our kids today?
Well, first, Sarah, thanks for having me on. Leadership is important for our kids because they're our future, and we've done a good job at raising generations of folks who know how to follow directions and get in line. But every generation needs people also are going to get out front and say, "Okay, follow me." And so we think it's critical that boys and girls get the best leadership training they can.
So how does Trail Life help boys develop their leadership skills? Now, this is correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but this is a group that has boys from kindergarten through their senior year of high school, right?
Correct. We start in kindergarten with the Foxes, and we go all the way up to our 12th grade boys. And leadership is weaved in our program. We look at 3 things primarily we are offering to boys. One is the opportunity for character growth, leadership opportunity and development of leadership skills, and then also outdoor adventure. And we think that outdoor adventure element is critical for boys. And we think the outdoors is a great laboratory for leadership skills. What we do is our troops are set up in patrols. And when they're at the elementary age level, from kindergarten through 5th grade, those patrols are smaller groups within the troop. And those patrols have a lot of adult influence. Because the boys at that age, they're gaining knowledge about the outdoors. They're gaining knowledge about how to grow in character and around the different frontiers that we look at, things like citizenship and heritage and all those things. They're gaining knowledge. And Sarah, as you know, because you have kids, you know that when kids are little, they have an amazing capacity for memorizing things. So in our younger program, they're in patrols, but they're doing a lot of knowledge work that they'll use later on. In the middle grade, they begin to be somewhat self-governing in that the patrols elect leaders of the patrols, and there'll be a junior patrol leader. That's the introduction to kind of leadership. It's their opportunity to lead their peers in something, but the adults are still there close by. And what they're focusing on at that phase is understanding. They're now getting understanding of the knowledge that they gained in the younger boy program. And then as they move into high school, in our adventurers program, they're still in patrols, but now the patrols are 100% boy-led, which means that these patrols are typically 6 to 8 boys are meeting, and there's an adult in the room, but the boys are making the decisions where they're going to camp, how they're going to set up their hike, what event they're going to do, the fundraiser they're going to do, the service project that they're going to do, whatever it is. But those boys are taking 100% leadership in that patrol. Now, in what other place in our society do boys really have the opportunity to practice leadership like that? And so in Trail Life USA, we are intentional about raising boys up, showing them how to be led. Their first job when they're younger is to learn how to be a leader of yourself. And then in the second program, in the Navigators, middle grade, they're learning what it's like to have leadership handed to you as that adult is nearby and assisting them. And then in the high school grade, they're actually stepping out and leading that patrol.
And I love that. And American Heritage Girls is kind of similar, and I'm a little more familiar with that because my girls have been involved with that for a long time. They're in high school now. And what I love about that type of program in Trail Life USA is the fact that you're teaching the skills to lead. So many times we just kind of default to kids who are extroverts, for example, kids who are willing to stand up in front. We're like, oh, well, you must be a leader. And we forget that with care, every boy and every girl, but we're talking about boys now. Every boy can lead in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be, standing up in front of a group. It can be leading in smaller groups in the patrol, or just learning how to, think for themselves and make those kind of decisions on a day-to-day basis, I think is so critical, because a lot of kids today, at least a lot of kids that, it seems my kids hang out with or know or I read about, have, they're searching for ways to be leaders. And it's hard to find people who are showing them this.
Yeah, and we don't do a really good job of teaching it in schools. And it's interesting that you bring that point up, because kind of the default leadership, you're right, is the most charismatic kid in the room. But I just read a study recently on the most successful CEOs in our country, the most successful business leaders in our country. And the most successful ones have a personality that's extremely low key and very humble and very quiet, and you wouldn't expect them to be what it is that we identify as a leader, which is the loudest guy in the room. And so what that's proof of is that it doesn't, the character of a person and the skills that they develop on purpose, that trumps any charisma that they have. And because it puts them in position to lead, and people will follow a leader who understands leadership principles and understands shared leadership and understands everything that you should be doing as a good positive leader. They'll follow them a lot longer than they'll follow somebody who has charisma. And so that's a really interesting point that you bring up, and specifically with boys, because so many of the mentorship models are disappearing from our culture. It seems they need a place where they can see godly men who are leading boys, and they need to have them as examples. So in Trail Life, our adult leaders are very involved. And from the age of, I think from 5th grade up, all of their direct contact leaders, which we call direct contact leaders, those are the people who are working with the boys, they're all male. Because we think that in our society today, boys have a lot of female leaders, and women are great leaders. But boys need to see a man leading. But the majority of the teachers are female. The majority of the Sunday school teachers are female. So boys are constantly being led by women who do a great job, but they need to see a man in leadership. So we give them that from 5th grade on. So they get to see a male mentor leading in a leadership position, taking that responsibility, and it gives them a vision for who it is that they can be.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, that is so important to have those positive role models, because I think about all the male role models that my boys, they're still in elementary school, may see. Now, there's a few male teachers in there, and I'm like, that's great. But one of my boys loves sports. So who's he watching and wants to read about? Sports figures. Now, some of them are great. A lot of them are rather full of themselves. I'm not sure that that's the right leadership role. So it's important, I think, for us to have those roles and to give our boys those opportunities to interact with men who are showing them what it means to be a leader. What do you think is one of the key things that you hope boys learn through your program about leadership?
Well, the two overriding principles of Trail Life USA is that we're Christ-centered and that we are boy-focused. So when you talk about what we want them to get out of the program, we want to understand the place of Christ, the place of Jesus in their life. And, of course, he epitomizes a tremendous leader. To have Jesus as a model of leadership is beautiful. His servant leadership, the way that he treated people, the way that he was decisive in his leadership. There's so many principles that boys can pick up. So that's woven through every part of Trail Life USA. They're going to be continually brought back to that Christ-centered focus, which is missing from a lot of our programs today. And the second thing is boy-focused. And this is an important point, Sarah, and it's politically incorrect, but I have to say it, is that boys and girls are different. And we love girls, American Heritage Girls is an outstanding organization. We work very closely with them. Patty Garabane is a good friend. We have 2 of their board members serve on our board of directors. We work closely with them, so we believe in girls, but we believe that boys and girls need programs that are specific to their learning styles and specific to who it is that they are. And so we think that it's important that as boys go through the program, and this is counter to our culture, that they learn that there are certain strengths that boys have that can serve society, that shouldn't be pressed down and shouldn't be minimized and shouldn't be demonized. And so some of those strengths that traditionally we've always attributed to boys, they're getting a message that, I can't be that way anymore. And we think that's dangerous for boys. So we want them to come through Trail Life USA recognizing that the strengths that they have are given by God, and they're designed in a certain way. They're different than girls. Biologically, psychologically, this is science. There's no one who can dismiss that boys and girls are different. There's so many things that point to that. Boys need risk and competition more than girls do. That's not a social construct. That's just the truth. You said you've got 2 girls and 2 boys. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And how old are your boys?
They are 10 and 12 right now.
So picture yourself 2 or 3 years ago, and you got your 2 boys coming up, and you're out somewhere in a grocery store or something, and they say, "Mom, can I go to the water fountain to get a drink of water?" When you say yes, you have just fired the starting gun. Right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to run to that water fountain. It's automatically raised. You didn't teach them to do that. That's not a social construct. That's built into them. Whereas you 2 girls, if you did that, you probably wouldn't see that response. There are things about boys and girls that are just different. We have to recognize that boys need that kind of environment where risk and competition is okay. They need that to grow. That's why men go to war. And that's why men service in those kind of ways, because it's in them to take that sort of risk for reward. And in our society today, a lot of that risk and a lot of that reward is taken away. The era of the participation trophies. Boys don't like that. Everybody did. I worked really hard and I got the same thing as everybody else. They don't go for that. That doesn't sit right. They're not wired that way. And also boys, more so the girls, need physical movement in order to learn. And so, that's why boys fidget. It's cool. They know intuitively what science tells us. Harvard professors tell us, and Harvard research tells us that movement increases the boy's capacity to learn. So when he's fidgeting in his seat, he is doing intuitively what he needs to know to be a better student. But we're shaming him for that and telling him to sit still. So in Trail Life USA, we set a different plate where boys are allowed to be boys, not in the sense of the cultural model that says that they're failures and they're abusive and they're aggressive and all these bad things, but in the sense that, hey, movement is going to help you. Competition is going to help you. Risk is going to help you. We put them in an environment where the things that God created on the inside of them are celebrated and allowed. We make room for those as they're enjoying the program. And the room changes as soon as you get girls in there. We all just know that. And so we are giving them a unapologetically Christ-centered and specifically boy-focused program where boys can be boys, they can grow and mature the way they want to. And that produces winning men. Because if they're not going to get that message from society, they've got to get it somewhere. So we equip them with that sense that it's okay to be who it is that I am, because this is a strength I have. And they take that into their marriages, they take that into their career, they take it into their service to our country.
Yeah, and you're so right, Mark, that boys are different than girls. Like I said, my first 2 were girls, and then we had a boy. We never found out the gender of our child until the child was born. And I remember my husband and I looking at each other and go, "Oh, well, this is going to be fun," because we were all used to girls. And and my 2 boys are totally different. They play differently. They interact differently. They are much, like you said, much more physical. And I know that boys and girls are different. And so I encourage that when I can, and, help them to enjoy the boyness of boys. And I think that's one thing that, again, like you touched on, it can be kind of missing in today's society, that girls, there's girl things that girls do, and that's great, but there's also boy things that boys do, and that's great too. And to help celebrate those differences in programs like American Heritage Girls and Trail Life USA, I think can be such a blessing to our kids. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you work with youth with the Trail Life USA, is what do you see are some of the issues facing what many are calling this Generation Z? What are our kids? I know these are my kids right now. What kind of issues do you think they're facing?
Well, you have to go all the way back to Genesis to see God's plan for things like marriage, and God's plan for men, and God's plan for women. And this generation is being raised where there's so much confusion about that it's going to be very difficult for them to figure out their roles. They're going to have certain biological, psychological pushes in one direction, then they're going to have cultural pressures to go in another direction. That's going to be very challenging. I mean, for boys to grow up without an idea of what it is to be a healthy boy, it's like we treat boyhood like it was some sort of social disease that needs to be eradicated, and it just isn't that. And so when you see these things, when you see the male shaming, when you see toxic masculinity, I mean, there are bad men out there doing bad things to people. I get that. It has always been thus. But when you paint every male as somehow being toxic because he's male, that's dangerous for our society. And you have to wonder what is at work there in order to take out that beautiful male element in our society that does things like keeps us safe and takes risks that we don't want to take. What is our world going to look like when that's no longer celebrated and it's seen as being somehow toxic or not a good thing? It would be just as dangerous to take out all the nurturing that women bring. That's in them, naturally in them, to default to that side. Now, certainly you don't put limits on anybody. If a woman wants to serve in another way, go for it. But she shouldn't be shamed for wanting to be a certain way any more than a boy should be shamed for wanting to be rough and tumble and who it is that he's been created to be. So I see that as a dangerous thing going forward, just the confusion that we're doing for young people. The Boy Scouts of America recently, 108-year-old organization that has given us presidents and senators and world leaders and business leaders and Eagle Scouts and all this wonderful thing. They just decided that the same program that they've delivered to boys for years in creating these wonderful men, that they can just deliver that same program to girls and it's not going to make a difference. Well, listen, that just isn't true. You can't deliver the same program, or you can't expect to have the same program produce the same results. And so that's dismissive of both boys and girls, I think. And so if we're in a culture that says it doesn't matter whether you're a boy or girl, it's one size fits all, that's just dangerous for boys and girls. We think that they need their own specific learning opportunities and growth opportunities, leadership opportunities, so that they can develop uniquely. Girls lead now, Sarah, in every category academically. The boys are twice as likely to be diagnosed special education, 3 times more likely to be diagnosed ADHD. Their suicide rates are through the roof when you look at compared to girls. Girls are now receiving more doctorates, more masters. There are more girls in college than there are boys. They've projected out a date where there will no longer be any boys who go to college anymore. Girls have been favored in the academic system in the sit down, be still, be quiet environment, and the boys have missed out majorly. And I think that's a huge danger. So I put those two things together. One is an educational system and a cultural system that favors girls, and also just a general sense and a culture that being male is something that's dangerous.
Yeah, and I hope that, pendulum was always swing in one direction or another. And I hope, because my boys are young, society will recognize that it's gone too far on the girls' side and come back. But who knows what will happen? I'm not a prognosticator, so I have no idea what's going to happen in the future.
That's interesting. We brought in some folks a couple weeks back, somebody from Alliance Defending Freedom, somebody from the legal team to talk with us about this issue, and then also somebody from Focus on the Family, who's one of the worldwide lead experts in gender issues. And after a day of talking about the future and where this is leading and what it all means to boys and girls and families, I asked that exact question. I said, well, is this a snowball that's going to keep rolling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Or is this a pendulum that hopefully is almost at one end and going to start to swing back? And these two men, very, very intelligent, wise, intellectual men, they had opposite answers. One said, it's a pendulum. It's got to swing back. And the other said, I'm sorry, it's a snowball. It's just going to continue to get worse and worse. So we can throw our hands up in the air and say, I don't know what it's going to be. Or we can say, you know what? I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to get behind programs like Trail Life. I'm going to get behind programs like American Heritage Girls. I'm going to support people who are saying what it is that I know, that boys and girls are different and that they need help. I'm going to support that stuff. And then culture will go where it goes. But at least I've done my part to make a difference. That's why we encourage people to, if you can't get involved, if you don't have a troop in your area, start a troop. If you can't start a troop in your area, donate to Trail Life so that boys in other areas can afford the program.
Yeah, and that's a great hopeful way to end our talk today, because I do see the future as hopeful with groups like Trail Life USA, and even my own elementary school, they're having more focus on making sure that all the kids get more recess time and things like that are really good they're good for girls, but they're really good for boys. So I see the future as more hopeful. Even though we are fighting against some, like you mentioned, some gender confusion in some areas, and some, preferences for girls and academics in some areas like that. But I do think that the future can be very bright for boys and for girls. Is there one last thought you would like to leave with my listeners about leadership and boys and a hopeful future that we have?
Well, one of the best kept secrets of Trail Life USA is the opportunity it gives to men to lead, because there's not a lot of opportunities sometimes in our churches to lead. There's the guy who stands up front, and there's some other positions, but for the most part, we think that men who are interested in discipling boys or mentoring young men, Trail Life is a great place for them. And the neat thing is they find their tribe there. And the best kept secret about Trail Life is that it's also a ministry that mentors men, because men going out camping or hiking or spending time with their sons and with other men and their sons, they get to see how men raise their sons, how they interact with each other. And around that campfire at night after the boys go to bed, the men have conversations like, hey, I saw the way that you talk with your son. How have you developed that relationship? Like, I really need that. So we encourage men, even if you don't have a son in the program, get involved with the Trail Life USA troop, traillifeusa.com, and find out how you can get involved and make a difference in a boy's life.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's a great reminder to my listeners, and a great way to end our talk today. So you've been listening to You've Got This. I'm your host, Sarah Hammaker, and today I've been talking with Mark Hancock. He's the CEO of Trail Life USA. You can find a link to that organization on this below this podcast, and I hope that you'll join me next week. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast of You've Got This with Sarah Hammaker. Sign up to receive notification of new podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhammaker.com. Until next time, remember, parenting might be hard sometimes, but don't worry, you've got this.